Filing is closed, and I thought we would run down this ballot with the man, all these Republican primaries, the man who more than anyone else created the modern Missouri Republican Party, David Barklage, the dean of the Missouri Republican Party. Thank you for the time, sir.
Well, I'm giving you time, even though I'm under a little duress because the Barklage Cup is still missing, I gather.
Yeah, I know. So we had this benefit. It was a benefit poker tournament that Patterson was in charge of, frankly. The next day, the Barklage Cup is missing. I've asked around for it, and no one seems to have it. I'm sure it's some freshman rep's office. It's probably their prized possession, though. I'll tell you that.
Well, I can imagine. By the way, I'm surrounded by subtlety. So if you do have to, if I need to put a disclaimer of who I'm supporting for governor, I'll let my office speak.
Coming live from the Keogh campaign headquarters is David Barklage. I saw that. I just started laughing. That's outstanding. David, let's start at the top here at this ballot. U.S. Senate doesn't seem to be that much drama. Josh Hawley's going to win the primary. He's going to be reelected, right?
Absolutely. You look at, even if we see what we saw a few years ago, where we had a significant wave in the cities, which could be driven if the abortion ballot amendment gets on, you're still going to have a counter wave much larger in all the out counties. And to that regard, I think it takes it out of reach. The margins in out counties, even with record votes in the cities and the two urban areas, just don't match up. And to that regard,
to me, the only thing interesting about this is if Carla May's the Democrat nominee and somehow Josh Hawley would get on a stage with her personality, I think she could become a bit of a viral sensation. I think she'd become a national pundit. I think that's the only good thing for this race.
I think she's a sensation on any stage she gets on.
Yeah. I think that putting her, the more eyeballs on Carla May, the better. She's just the type of person she is when she's on television, wherever, you just look at her. She just draws your attention. In Congress, y'all got to keep Cori Bush in St. Louis?
Well, I was going to say, besides Cori Bush, our friend who was on the probation parole board and former senator, she's probably the only one that can up Carla May on the stage. I have to say that. And
if I was Josh Hawley, I would never get on stage with her, ever. Yes. The other ones, whatever. Y'all going to keep Cori Bush there in St. Louis?
I think I think that Cori is someone who 2 years ago couldn't be beat. This cycle, it's a question mark. 2 years from now, probably would be very vulnerable. I think we're in transition between the radical left and right having so much influence in primaries. But I sense that there is some turn because we're starting to see our schools, highways, infrastructure, defense, so many of these core issues are starting to collapse to the extent that voters are starting to pay attention instead of just who uses the bathroom, but actually, who and how trade works. And to that regard, Cori Bush could be in some trouble. I would have to say that race, in my opinion, is a toss-up. I think the best person is running against her that has a chance against her. I just don't know if it's time, and I think she is such a powerful force. Anybody that disregards her ability, because she came on the national scene so quickly, so adeptly, that I think they're making a mistake. I think she's got real game. She'll have real money. And I think, it's going to be a real toss-up, but I think she's a lot stronger than anybody gives her credit for. But I think her opponent's strong too.
So the 3rd district race changed today. Senator Coleman dropped out. Look, maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but this race did you run the Luke DeMeyer race back in 2008 when it was open?
I did. I mean, against Bob Onder.
It just looks to me like you have 50% of the district on the west of Wentzville, 50% east of Wentzville. Why would anybody from west of Wentzville vote for a St. Louisan? And why would anybody in St. Charles County vote for a guy from Columbia? It looks to me like Kurt Schaefer. I mean, look, I think there's some issues. Being a lobbyist is going to be something he's going to have to address. But Kurt Schaefer is the Western Missouri guy. He's ran before. He's going to have money. I mean, I think it's very safe to say Kurt Schaefer's going to have significant resources to run this race. But Bob Onder, boy, he kind of feels like the kind of guy, the anger of that Republican electorate. Bob seems to have a feel for that.
I think it's the same dynamic as Cori Bush. The question is the transition this cycle or next between the far right winning primaries that look like Bob Onder and the Kurt Schaefer starting to win back primaries. To that extent, I'll give you a couple checks on both sides. Bob Onder has always been a good fundraiser. He's got the support of the trial bar. His brother
could write the check for the whole race.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think the trial bar is particularly toxic as it used to be. I also don't think being a lobbyist is particularly toxic. You are an advocate for interest. And I just don't think people are particularly dismayed by that. I think that Blaine Luetkemeyer weighing in so heavily and most likely for Kurt Schaefer is going to be, very helpful in terms of those outstate margins. I will take exception. I don't believe 50% is east of Wentzville and 50% is west of Wentzville. I would break out Jefferson County, but even with Jefferson County in, it's less. I would break out Jefferson County as an outlier. I think Mary Elizabeth's leaving that open could marginally help Bob Onder, but St. Charles and Jefferson County have been two very separate entities. I think how each campaign approaches that territory will matter. But I think Kurt Schaefer will have resources. Bob will have resources. That is going to be, in my opinion, a bellwether race. As that race goes, we will see the races across the country between the Freedom Caucus / Matt Gaetz and company versus the old McCarthy and the mainstream Republicans. I think this race will be a reflection of what happens nationally.
You're going to run Kurt's race?
I am going to work on a super PAC in that race that will be supporting Kurt Schaefer.
So, I mean, end of the day, I think you're right, but you almost have to see things change first. Is there I thought Senator Coleman's path was maybe if you're from St. Charles, you just don't like Bob Onder for whatever reason, he'll be the front runner, he'll get attacked. Maybe she would pick up those votes. And if Kurt Schaefer was attacked, Catholic, talented politician, you pick up some of those votes and be kind of second everywhere, sort of like how Russ Carnahan won his primary back in the day. With her gone, does Justin Hicks do that? Or could Kurt Schaefer come over and pick up some of those votes in St. Charles County that get turned off to Bob Onder?
You really, very astute sort of observation. I would put it as that, how many voters, Bob Onder, for example, clearly had an ideology that he prosecuted every day in the Senate. I think he's somewhat pure. You can always impeach somebody's record, but I think you and I know for the truth of it that Bob Onder at his heart has always been a very sincere libertarians / sort of Tea Party person. And to that regard, I think he's the real deal. On the other hand, he got very little done in the Senate because of his ideology and his purity. I think that's a hindrance to anybody in that space. Kurt Schaefer is clearly, as a budget chairman, they become very pragmatic, very practical. So I think it's going to come down to the voters that want to get stuff done, that want to get highway funding, that want to get back to, managing government better and getting results versus those who have an ideological crutch that they want to exercise by sending Bob to Washington. And look, I've always thought send an asshole to Washington makes a lot of sense. I don't know if I can say that, but sending people won't change. Blaine Luetkemeyer never changed from the day he left to the day he's come back. Bob Onder, I don't think either, but neither would Kurt Schaefer. So I think this is going to be a matter of two visions. And I think you're right. I think there's opportunity for both campaigns. It's going to be who articulates the better vision and executes the better campaign.
We'll start from the bottom. We'll go win with some state senate races. Let's talk about the state treasurer's race. You got a candidate in the state treasurer's race?
Cody Smith. But I have to say, Vivek is the first politician that's hugged me the first time I met him. And I thought it was the most sincere thing in the world. And you just, what a guy that is sincere, he's qualified. I think obviously there is biased, not to say that would be to ignore the elephant in the room in terms of his name, but he's going to do a lot to try to turn that around, and Missouri will not be in a bad spot if they elect him.
Hell, somebody asked me if people would hold it against him and he was from India. I was like, hell, I hold it against him. He's from Cape.
Yeah, well, there you go. You've always held that against all of us, you West.
Well, you come by it honestly. Is it come down to this? I mean, Andrew Kading and Cody Smith, good guys, accomplished guys. it feels to me like Vivek can almost buy this thing. I mean, where
You
do
know,
they put together the money to?
but
And I'll just my view of a statewide race is this, and maybe I'm antiquated, and I don't do this for a living, but in
well,
a
you're from
statewide race, you
Westmoreland
can raise
County,
enough
so
money. You can raise enough money to go define yourself, maybe, but it's hard to raise enough money to define yourself and attack your opponent in a
I agree.
three-way. I think usually they all look around. The other guy's going to attack him. Like I could see Andrew and Cody staring at each other all summer, thinking, "Well, you should attack Vivek. You should attack Vivek," and neither one of them do it. Maybe they don't have the money to do it, and Vivek buys it.
Well, that would be if we lived in a vacuum and there weren't consultants out there that would make those connections and try to get people to gang up. I mean, I have to tell you that in Jason Bean's race and a lot of different Senate races, you had two candidates sort of triangulate on one, and it made a difference in the outcome. Carla Esslinger, who went from 21 points behind to winning by 100 votes or so. So I do think that the Koenig's operation, Cody's operation, they'll talk at some point, and try to look at how they can triangulate. But with that being said, look, Cody is going to be very qualified. He comes from the right part of the state. He looks like a good candidate, and I think he can run a good race. Koenig is the original grassroots guy. He has come from behind many times. I wouldn't count him out.
Yeah.
And then you've got Lori Rook, and Lori Rook could take a lot of votes out of Springfield. But she's a first-time candidate, and first-time candidates can be very challenged. So
am I wrong to think Lori Rook, being the only woman here, could place well and it be a name you hear many times over later?
Yeah, well, the polling has her out in front, and remember Sandra McDowell, her drubbing of the now Lieutenant Governor candidate Wassinger, when he spent 300 times more money than she did, and she ended up winning the primary. So these primaries can be very touchy. I think it's going to be a toss-up. I think Vivek is doing everything he needs to do. It's just a matter if Missourians can get past their bias and embrace someone who clearly is qualified, or if they choose, the other guys that are all qualified too. It's a matter of just choice.
Vivek's a hell of a guy. I mean, he's just a hell of a nice guy.
Just so you know, Peter Kinder, if he watches this, he needs to remember my kind words of Vivek, because he wasn't sure I was so kind to Vivek earlier this week. But indeed, I find Vivek absolutely a charming gentleman.
Well, I might normally not know if Peter would watch, but when we promoed you, I have no doubt he will watch this.
Yeah.
And probably have many critiques of your analysis, which I'll look forward to hearing.
Scott Charton is as well, and he's actually who I'm more scared of, because Scott takes me through the ringer on anything I do. He's like a big brother that won't go away. So anyway.
Yes, but I think Peter has some acid with his critiques, or at least he does of mine, where Scott's are more constructive. Nice.
Yeah. I never got a whole lot of overconfidence working with Peter. That was for sure. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about this attorney general race. I mean, Sharf Bailey, you got a guy from New York, from Harvard, versus a Missouri war hero. Am I wrong to think, though, this race could come down to, I'd assume you're working for the Missourian in this one.
I am.
I think this comes down to, Bailey has done all the things to try to get crazy people to like him.
Right.
I mean, he's basically put on the clown nose that Schmidt and Hawley put on. He's got the face paint, the excellent goof. But there is so much money behind Sharf. Could Sharf just come in here and just buy this thing no matter what Bailey does?
So Bailey is in the unenviable position of running for an office that he has not run statewide before or ever before. And being a first-time candidate is a challenge into itself.
Sure.
That's the big deal, the attorney general. 2, running the attorney general's office in itself is
a real job.
Yeah. Chris Koster told me it was one of the toughest jobs in politics. And when he explained it to me, I believed him, because you've got so many conflicts of interest, so much public, exposure, et cetera. To that regard, I think it's hard for Andrew to choose between being a candidate and being attorney general most days. Will Sharp doesn't have that problem. He can focus on being a candidate every day. He has, through family and professional, developed a network probably second to none. And the problem here is I think Andrew is going to be leading this race all the way up to about June 15th. And the problem is that can he match in any way, shape, or form Will Sharp's resources from mid?
But I mean, honestly, his story is so great.
It is.
I mean, let's be honest. Sharp's story is not the story you would ever want a candidate to have. I mean, I think the best part of his story probably is the stuff where he's got to be a lawyer for Trump. I think that was good politics. But other than that, I mean, the story's not a great one. Nothing wrong with it. Will is a genius. He might be the smartest person I actually know. Andrew's story is terrific. He doesn't have to match Scharf dollar for dollar, right? But what is that ratio? How much money does Bailey have to have percentage wise to Scharf to win that race?
Look, you saw Hawley. Kurt Schaefer was up in double digits over Hawley, and Hawley's onslaught. He had that financial wherewithal, and it ended up swamping significantly Kurt Schaefer. And to that regard, I think that's the potential Will Scharf has. It's a question of, will Missouri donors allow themselves to be dislodged in an office like this by out-of-state donors, and what kind of commitments will come through? Certainly, he has made relationships with major donors in Missouri. Bailey has. We'll see how those come out. I think that both of them will be different kinds of attorney general. Andrew is, but Will be a good attorney general in a different way. I personally think that Andrew is a good reflection of the state, and probably is a good team player. I think Will be automatically on the national scene. I think that's his calling is to be more national. So two different visions, two different candidates. It'd be an interesting race. If Bailey can raise the adequate funds, I think he has a chance to hold on. Otherwise, I have to say it'd be a tough race. But I would just say to Andrew, balance what you do every day for the attorney general and raise the money so that you can continue your vision. It's just how the job works. And if he can do that, he can hold on and he'll win.
It's one of those things where you can do the base work of the state treasurer. Maybe it ain't 40 hours. I mean, you could put more time into it, work hard and do things, but the attorney general is a minimum 40, and it's probably more like a 60-hour a week job just doing that job. I mean, it is a serious commitment, and there's no other way to get around it. You got to do it. I mean, the buck does stop there.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the Secretary of State race where everyone filed today. You got a candidate in that?
Secretary of State's race, are you trying not to look at me and smile when you said that? So Scott, should I call you out right now? Should I put the bleep button on? So it's no mystery that I've worked for Mary Elizabeth Coleman in past races, and I like her. I think she's an incredibly talented woman.
Well, I mean, you've worked for Mike Carter, Mary Elizabeth Coleman, Dean Plocker. Did you ever work with Jamie Corley? That's one I don't know.
No, I haven't. And I think she's got an interesting story. But Mary Elizabeth, I think she's made the right decision. Congress, I think she asked the right questions and found out it wasn't right for her family, and I respect that. I think it's a good shot for her to look at Secretary of State. I think for Dean Plocker, it makes all the sense in the world. Look, Dean wanted to run for Secretary of State, but deferred to Caleb Rowden out of just simply the fact you had two leaders of different bodies. Caleb wanted to run for Secretary of State. Dean, deferred and looked in lieutenant governor. When Caleb got out, Dean decided to go this race. I like it for him because if he's able to prosecute his case before ethics, which I have no doubt that he will, we all know that it's a staff-driven scandal, that it wasn't.
My God, it is the longest thing I've ever seen.
But if he gets out of that,
you could almost get $4,000 out and serial and arrange them by serial number. The Warren Commission was met for less months than these people have met.
If they, after the fact, go after a guy who paid back an accounting mistake, what are they going to do to all the representatives that are out there and senators?
How many Democrats are left by Memorial Day?
Well, yeah, and so
that Kelton runs down to David. Kelton runs an illegal sports book. We did some betting earlier today, and let's roll Barklage in $10 a pop. You're good for it. Is the ethics investigation over by the time the college national championship is over?
No.
Is the ethics investigation over by the time the budget's done?
No.
Is the investigation over by the time the FRA's passed?
Yes.
I think that's probably right. Into session. By the end of session, they just say the hell with it and just throw something against the wall and move on? I see this coming as a big shit show, but at the end of the day, they just throw something out there and say, look, we tried to get him and we couldn't, we're out.
Look, I think that if this investigation was being run by the members, it would have been over by now. The fact that staff's running it, it looks like they want to try to expand it because they can't find anything of where they're at. I respect the members of that committee, and I respect where they're going to end up making their decision. I think Hannah Kelly is very capable. I think the committee is very capable. Judge Evans is an honorable man, and I think that they will make the right decision.
Can you imagine being in the locked room with David Evans, listening to how sanctimonious he is for hours and hours? That's public service.
You know, he's got a lot on his plate. I've heard his wife is been sick and everything else, but Judge Evans was very helpful to me when Carla Esslinger's race. All I can say is that I believe in the system, and I think they're going to find out that it's being manipulated and do the right thing. With that being said,
let's pivot back to this race here. I think probably, this hurt Dean Plocker. Is it fatal? No. Let's start with the guy. He's got $1.4 million on hand, right? Who he's working with? Obviously, he's got some nicks and cuts from this. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I almost think the name ID he has from this might even be worth it when you start talking about running the primary. If he comes through with some big accomplishments, I think he could add to that significant 1.4. If you're Denny Hoskins, who I think woke up Monday morning, when Denny Hoskins come to town Monday, he was the front runner that had filed. Lemke's built a great group, organized activists that are behind Denny. Denny's been doing the work. He's been working harder than any of these folks at this race. He's been making the towns. Denny has put more time into this than everybody else. I think Denny's a serious candidate. I think Denny's going to do. If I had to say, I don't disagree. I'd say Denny.
And in fact, because of Jim Lemke, I'd say he's serious. Jim is incredibly capable. He does a really good job. People have shorted Jim, and I think it's because Jim does put his heart out for his clients, and I can't criticize him for that, and I think others shouldn't either. But here's my point. Dean in the race with Lieutenant Governor, there was always going to be a pull between the budget chairman and the Speaker of the House. Dean, as Speaker of the House in this, I think gets the fair share of money on top of what he has, and it is hard, which you were starting to talk about earlier. If you've got 1.5 to 2.5, you can beat every media market in the state and say a lot of good things about yourself, and you can get elected. If you don't have that, it's very tough. I don't see Denny getting there. I've always, thought that Denny's very capable, but in this race, I think Dean, if he gets his things resolved with ethics, that he's going to be hard to beat. I think, and outside of that,
he's hard to beat, but I think Denny Hoskins,
Coleman any day.
He's got some money. Denny's got a path. I think Denny has a path. I mean, it's going to come down to he's going to have to add to that money total. But I mean, if the VLT folks don't cut Denny Hoskins a big check, who the hell's going to want to talk to him come January? I mean, there's going to be some folks that Denny can raise money from. He has been working it.
But boy, term limited senator after session is not easy to raise money for.
I get you. I think the VLT people have to give him money, or everybody else is going to be like, well, don't help them. I mean, they'll just leave you high and dry. The Valentina Gomez, I like her videos. She's a pissed off chick. It's kind of funny. I don't know Jamie Corley much. I think she did some sort of IP deal. Adam Schwadron, I kind of felt like there was a window here. I never really thought Caleb would run for this. And I said that on this show and others. Caleb Browden has had the hardest leadership Senate career, the most challenging environment since I think the Civil War for a guy to deal with. He deserves some time off. I mean, very seldom the guys that have carried that heavy plow of leadership do they actually run statewide. I never really thought that's what he would do. I thought Adam Schwadron had a window to maybe step in and grab some financial commitments and kind of take over Caleb's thing. It was hard for a freshman House member to make that kind of move, though.
Look, I agree. I think it's before his time. I think he is a good guy, very capable. I just don't think he's ready yet for this. And it's not a matter of him. It's a matter of his network, his campaign, his structure, his experience in the Missouri election pool. To that regard, I think it shorts him. Jamie, I think, has a unique story. She has a unique perspective. I think she is a very capable person. It'd be interesting. It'd be something to write about how she does. I think, though, Mike Carter is his own,
let me
brand.
pitch you something before we get to Mike, because Mike's such an interesting topic. We could talk for a long time. Schwadron's got a big check. I thought this was something he was just floating out there to do we would see him again. Then he got $100,000 donation. That's a big deal. I understand there's some more where that came from. Could be. What number does Adam Schwadron have to get to hit to really make an impact in this race?
1.5.
1.5. Well, I was going to guess maybe $1.25 million, but I would take your advice. And plus, it's the Biden economy, so inflation. Mike Carter, interesting
one
guy.
thing before Mike Carter, just remember this: with all the races up, can you imagine what the point cost is going to be in that last 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And what's going to happen? All these down ballot guys that thought they were going to get 1,000 points in this market or that market aren't going to be able to touch it because of all the other races. And so,
Tom Tippett is going to be a happy boy.
Yeah, a lot of these candidates, it's going to be very tough sailing in the last week if you don't have more than enough money to try to penetrate those markets.
David, when do you start buying that TV? When do you start? At what point do you start buying Cardinal games in the end of July? When do you have to actually have the money to the TV station to buy that?
Well, the problem is, the smart move is if you go in May and June, you can move huge points overnight in a week because you're the only one up. Come June 15th, it's going to cost you $1 million a week to move many points. And to that regard, if I'm a down ballot person, the question is really not framed as you were suggesting. I mean, I guess it is. You're going to be looking at Cardinals. You're going to be looking at what news services, what addressable cable, Hulu. You're going to be
go buy that, David. When do you have to sit? If you want to buy a Cardinal, if you want to buy the July 25th St. Louis Cardinals game, and you want 3 spots in that game, when do you have to send them the money for that? I just always been curious about this.
So it depends on the stations that carry it. There are stations that require the money down when you make the buy, and there's a few stations that allow you to reserve it. And to that extent, it's a mix. It's about 60% you have to place the actual money, maybe 50%, and about half that you don't have to. So to that regard, it's a very complicated process for down ballot candidates that don't have the interest of consultants that are national experts about how to buy that, or experts like in Missouri, the Thompson boys, the Thompson twins, that kind of thing. If you don't have them looking at this thing, you're going to be sitting with a bunch of money you can't spend.
Yeah. So clicking on down here, Mike Carter. I mean, Mike Carter has a great if you could pick somebody to have a beer with on this list, it'd be Mike Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And he could self-fund. But he kind of does it in a unique way. Everything with Mike's a little bit unconventional. Mike's ran for several things. He knows what running's like. I really thought he should have won that state Senate race. I really thought Travis Fitzwater came in and stole that thing with a hell of a campaign. So if you were talking to Mike Carter, I know you're working for Plucker, but if you're talking to Mike Carter, what would you tell him to do to win this race? Let's say he's going to put $1 million in. That's what he's going to do. I don't know how much he raised, but he's going to put $1 million in. Could he win that race with $1 million, and how would he?
So he reminds me of other candidates I've had that come from the business area. He is such a promoter, and he's so good at promotion. But campaigns, they have a narrow definition that you need to operate in. And I think to that regard, that he needs to, listen to Roy Riddler and his team and follow a more traditional path. He's got out early, spent a lot of money, got himself way ahead, but put a target on himself from everybody. And to that regard, there's never enough money if everybody's shooting at you. So my advice to him is listen to like Roy or your team and take a more traditional path as much as you want to resist that, because you are the original, sort of promoter. And I think it's going to be tough for him to break out of that mode. But remember this, Mike Carter wins either way. Mike Carter's deal is, I've run, I've gotten attention, I've had some fun, I've gotten my voice out there. And if I don't win, I'm that much more known. I've got that much more of a brand, and he wins anyway. So Mike Carter, I'm going to say today, he will win. If not this race, he'll still win.
Yeah, I think, this was, if Mike Carter would have jumped in with $1 million 2 weeks ago, does everybody else and their brother file for this?
Yeah.
You do? Let's talk about Senator Coleman. She moved over races today. I always felt the congressional thing was a square peg in a round hole. It just felt like, boy, I could see how she could have garnered some votes. It was tough for me to see how she would win. This race, she doesn't start with a lot of money. Well, she got I've seen, and this is just from recollection, I think from Keller on Twitter, that she had about a couple $100,000 in commitments. I don't know how much of those were in the door, but I would think what in your history, I guess you've had to run a campaign or two. We've had to switch that money over. You get you get 3/4 of that, 2/3 of that. You actually get switched over and back in the bank.
Remember, she's gone from federal to state dollars, and federal
so
dollars.
She's got to send the check back and have them send the check to the state committee, right?
Yep, and federal
that's
dollars.
A little bit of work.
It is. It's work.
I know a gal from Bonterra that's probably going to have a long week.
Yeah, you better treat her right. And I've got to talk to you about that after this session. There's a few pointers as a guy from Cape to tell you West Butler County guys that how you treat a woman. But to that regard, so Casey, I hope you heard that, because I'm always fighting for you and to get the upper hand on this guy. On this hillbilly.
You might be the chairman of the Casey fan club.
I am. And my staff is too. They think she's the best.
What's the old saying? I'd take a bullet for Casey and I'd put one in Scott.
Yeah, well, I didn't say that, but others have. So I think she'll be able to translate those dollars. I think people that were giving her for Congress, that was a harder sell. And to that regard, I can't imagine why they wouldn't give her that money.
But this is a point of politics, because I've told people all day, since you could do this, you're going to see a master class in politics. You should, if you do this, you should save this video. If you've ran a race before, so let's just assume she has 200,000 in commitments. I think that's what Keller tweeted. Let's assume that's accurate. So she maybe has half that in the door, half that coming in. I have no idea what the breakdown of that is, or if it's even real. He could have been bullshitting me, but I assume, she's talented enough that I can believe that figure.
Keller bullshits, but he never lies. So
yeah, I'm with you on that. So let's say she has 200 in commitments.
He's got the hair.
The easiest ones would be the one that haven't sent you the check yet, right? Because don't send that check. Just write it to this a different account. But the ones that have, normally, what is the percentage of you're going to send them their check back, their $2,000 or whatever it was, and then they're going to write you the new one? What percentage actually makes it out of your account? I guess 100% makes it out of your account. What percent makes it back to your campaign account?
Probably 80%.
That seems high. Are you sure about that? I mean, that's what you found it.
I'm in a process right now with a candidate that is switching out, and I'd say they'll hit over 80%. I think that'd be the same to her, because those dollars were people that wanted to give directly to her, had a relationship. I don't see too many of them caring if she really runs for Congress or Secretary of State, especially the fact that she was working to preserve her family and made a choice that was better for her family.
I think she could raise. I mean, keep in mind, middle of her term, she's got 2 more years to run. I don't see her having a serious primary opponent. I mean, she can go push people for that money, and if they give it to her, I mean, honestly, if you're a lobbyist, you'd rather give her the money and her stay in the state Senate, right? I mean, if you help build that relationship with a large contribution for Secretary of State, you're kind of hoping she loses, frankly.
Mary Elizabeth Coleman can stop anything in the Senate she wants as much as anybody, or probably more than most people. And obviously, lobbyists are going to look at that. They don't want to be on a point with her that she can just put her energy against their issue. It's always easier to kill in the Senate than to pass, and she is more clever than the average senator. But
she can handle herself on the floor. So so she's coming out of this race. I don't think anybody's going to care if she switched races. I mean, she switched races because she thought she could win this one, didn't think she could win the other one. Just like everybody we've talked about so far, there's an element of truth in that. So what does she have to do to win this race?
She has to raise money.
Well, I think she got 50. Let's say she has 100 on hand from her state account through her PAC and her other one. I don't think there's more than that. I could be wrong, but I don't think there is. So she gets 200 of this. She gets back 80%. So that puts her right about, let's say she's at 250. I mean, she's going to have to knock down some big checks. It's going to be hard to $2,000 your way in the amount of time she has to $1.5 million. But she's going to have to knock down some big checks.
She's got the rest of session to triangulate and to show real value. So, and there's plenty of time to do that. She could be a star the next month and a half. To that regard, though, I still think she's going to need about 1.5 million plus. And
then she just says, I hate abortion more than all these other people, right?
Yeah, but you know what? Does she lose if she loses? I mean, she's still in. She was not the person people picked to win the Senate race. She won the Senate race. She's not necessarily anybody's pick that she'll win this race.
You and I picked her. I think we both thought she was going to win.
We did. But I've got great faith in her. But my point is that I think that she doesn't lose her reputation on this race. How she runs it will determine how she does. I agree. She will not have much of an opponent next time as she runs for Senate. But my sense is that she has very little to lose in this race and a lot to gain. And that's not a bad place to be.
Let's talk Lieutenant Governor. Tim Baker, nice guy. I like that guy. He's the county clerk in Franklin County. I happen to love Franklin County, one of my favorite counties.
Oh, yeah.
Nice dude. Got to put money together. Paul Berry, my old buddy, got to put money together, right? Paul's ran for several things. Some of these things seem like a stretch because it's hard for him. He hasn't raised money in the past. You got to raise money, right? I mean, to be really put in this game, is a lieutenant governor, is that just 1.5 for a statewide race? That's where you got to be?
I think it's a minimum. I mean, I've seen races, and I can go through races you're familiar with, and where you had candidates that didn't have that money. They're just not known in Kirksville, Hannibal, Joplin, Cape Girardeau, and their numbers just drop down. It's just a beauty contest at that point, or a guess. You've got, in lieutenant governor's race, you got a sausage fest. You've got Holly, which gives her a leg up, even if her money's down. She's the only woman. I think that's an advantage. You've got Lincoln, who's going to have the money.
Let's break down Wassinger first, though. David Wassinger ran in 18. This is my take. I like David Wassinger. I love his wife. Colleen's a great lady. I mean, David's a hell of a guy. He actually, I've got to find this hat. He trademarked "Make Missouri Great Again." He gave me one of the hats, and it's in my office. I'm going to dig that out. On the board of curators, he had a couple huge licks as a trial lawyer. And a successful guy. So last time I think he put in like 500 or something, but he didn't spend it, and he got kind of embarrassed, frankly, by Sandra McDowell. Like I think that it would have stung any guy that's successful as David Wassinger to lose to Sandra McDowell, but she was the only woman. He didn't spend his money. So this, I just have in my gut, it tells me that if David Wassinger, who's an intelligent man, is going to do this again, he's planning on actually spending the money.
Well, you would think in politics, people can be stupid in more than one race. But to that regard, David is very bright, very capable. And
what's
I
the
agree
chances
with
are
you.
he makes that same? I mean, if he doesn't spend the money, why run? I think you could. He probably met the field. Maybe it wasn't a real impressive field to him. So he thought he could keep his money and go through it. There's no way you could look at this field and say, I can just get through on my name. I don't have to spend the money. If you're doing this, you got to spend your money.
If I were him, I'd write myself, $1 million, $2 million as a loan and be able to, his strategy would be to do that, win the race, take a risk, but win the race, and then he can get himself paid back over the years. That's probably the smart move for him. I don't know if he would go that far. I certainly couldn't speak for him. But look, he's a dynamic candidate. He's a true conservative, a believer. He's got a good network in St. Louis. I think he'll be a top finisher. I'm not sure, unless he writes that check, he'd be the top finisher, but I think he definitely is the guy that's going to finish in the top of the pack.
Holly Rader, Cinder from our neck of the woods, extremely talented politician.
Yep.
I think the most talented politician in this field. I mean, she that accent, she understands issues. She's got a good network of folks. I think she gets to that $1.5 million. And she's just a damn good politician. And honestly, our neck of the woods used to not be a real great place to be from, because we used to have some Democrat courthouses, and some of the folks from South Louisiana voting Democrat primary to vote for judge or assessor or whatever. Now we're all, since Trump came in, 100% Republican. The 8th district is not a bad place to be from. It's just so big, it's not as communal as maybe the 7th is now. But Holly's a very viable contender in this, right?
She'll be a top finisher along with Wassinger and with Huff. I think, being a woman in that race is a huge advantage. But, I think her hindrance is she's, come out of a personal relationship. She's trying to, set her life. She has every right to find a life that really complements who she is and allows her to be who she is. It sort of reminds me of Steve Tilley when Steve came in and said, I'm not going to run for lieutenant governor because I just want to go out and live my life. I think that Holly probably has those questions at times where she's trying to decide, do I want to continue in politics? And I think she has the passion for it. Or do I want to try to find the life that I deserve? and I mean that sincerely, because I think she's a beautiful person and that she deserves that. I don't know if you can do both at the same time. And to that extent, my sense about her campaign is that it doesn't have the energy that I think she could convey if she were all in. And I think that is something that probably she's wrestling with. I don't know that, but my sense is that, you know, she'll figure it out. She's got a great team, and she'll be a top finisher.
I do see what you're saying about the energy. There's an energy from just knowing her that she has that is very infectious. But I've not necessarily seen that broken through to a campaign yet, like I kind of
Yeah.
expected. Let's talk about the guy that got in here and shook this whole race up, Lincoln Huff, the Senate Appropriations Chairman, cattle farmer from Southwest Missouri. He has the job every Republican pretends they have when they run for statewide office. He doesn't have to borrow a tractor to take his pictures. Um, the guy that redid I-70, did the tax cuts, he comes in and he's been raising money. My God, I mean, it is the most impressive down ballot fundraising. I guess it's a month now I've ever seen.
So look, he's going to have the money. He's one of the best fundraisers there is in the Senate by far. And he was good at that before he even became budget chairman. Now that he's budget chairman, it gives him huge leverage. Lincoln, I think it's Lincoln's to lose. Lincoln is going to be a top finisher because of money. The difference between him being in the pack and on top of the pack is the quality campaign he runs. And the question is that, you know, I think that he wasn't the strongest campaigner for Senate, but he won, and that he not used his lesson from that Senate race.
He might have gotten more out of hours work than anyone else, but I'm not sure there was that many hours of work.
Yes. And I think if he allows himself,
but David, to that point though, I have seen a difference in him since he decided, before even he filed anything like that, before he announced, he decided he was going to do this. And I did see that there is a different look to the guy. The guy has a different hustle about him. There's a I don't want to say frantic, but there's a high level of urgency in him right now. There is an energy I've never seen before. I certainly didn't see it either with his Senate runs. There's a level of hustle about him right now. If he sustains that, I totally agree with you.
Look, he's comes from a great part of the state to come from in a primary. Blunt, Ashcroft, others have done very well coming from Southwest Missouri. So he's got geography, which is important. He's got money, which brings name ID, which is more important. He's a good-looking guy. I know that if you weren't dating Casey, you'd probably be dating him. That's the rumor in Jeff City. I'm just stating it right now.
You're not wrong. I mean,
but you know, with that being said,
that beard. Everybody knows Kelton. I mean, look at Kelton and tell I like a beard.
Yeah.
So I guess to me, I mean, I think he could get to 2.5, and it's different if you raise it. Wassinger's money is going to be pretty much him giving himself money. It all spends the same. It's a little more valuable if it comes from different folks, different parts of the state. I think there's a group of people Mike Keogh has ignited to get involved in state government, and I think Lincoln Hill's benefiting from a lot of that wake right now. People talk about votes. I've never seen a vote that wasn't about abortion, or maybe I've really never seen many votes ever matter if you campaign hard. He's going to put together a good crew. I think he is a front runner.
How do you hit him?
You got to do it.
How do you hit him? I mean, you've got to spend about 1.5 on getting your own name ID. You got to have another $1 million if you want to try to even hit him. And so the false premise of this race on Lincoln is that he's the liberal, that he's going to be outed by, you know, the right. Well, they're not going to have the money to do it if it were true. He's got geography, money. He's got the look. If he runs the campaign, I think he's going to be hard to beat. I think that Wassinger and Holly have their own pass. I think those are the three that have pass whatsoever. I think it's Lincoln's to lose, and I think it's going to be very hard for anybody to hit Lincoln and try to paint him anything that he's not. And to that regard, I'd have to give him the upper hand.
We skipped over one person, but I talked about him a bunch the other day, Shane Schuler. Shane, in another world where Todd Aiken has laryngitis or gets kidnapped in Gaza somewhere in 2012, he's finishing up his second term as governor. I think Shane has a base of vote in that 7th district that he's going to get. Is there any chance that the number it takes to win comes down low enough that his base in the 7th wins it for him?
I don't think so. Look, I hate to even say it because Shane is such a decent person.
Great dude.
I don't know anybody that dislikes him. I think he's competent. He's done a good job as clerk of Greene County. I think that what he does is he takes a block of votes that could move and throw that whole campaign off. I think he ties them down, but I think that he has not been able to establish money or fundraising at a level that he needs. And to that regard, he is everybody's first choice who knows him. And unfortunately, there may not be enough people who know him to.
But if you've been to those Republican events in Southwest Missouri and you've gotten to know him, you're voting for him and you don't give a damn. That's where you're at.
No, I mean, look, you just can't say anything bad about the guy.
Yes.
And if I just think he's a great guy that's not going to have the resources to get there. The people that know him will vote for him, but too many people don't know him. And also, Justin, we did just mention Justin, the congressional race.
Yeah.
I do think that he, I talked to him, and I think his heart is there. I think
Super nice guy.
I think, if he can get the commitments, he presents an interesting dynamic in that race. And I wish
if you're
him well.
Kurt Schaefer, you're like, go, buddy, go, right?
Yeah, but I think that he's a very sincere guy who brings a different perspective, and I love to see guys like that in primaries and women like that in primaries because I think they change the dynamic. He'll be at debates, and I think he'll be tenacious, and so I think he'll be more thought better of when this race is over than where he's starting because I think he'll do a good job.
All right, so let's talk about the big race, the governor's race. Starting at the beginning, the Democrats, holy shit. Republicans try to restrict poor people from voting. It's a strategy that you can argue with or not. The Democrats always say, well, there is no voter fraud. They just took a guy who voted in Chicago 4 years ago and said, oh, no, you've been a resident here 10 years. You either lied Chicago or you lied here. It's a gal that actually turned around the entire anemic House Democrat effort and has been picking up seats. It was the most Democrat thing ever. I mean, I talked to my donkey here for a while this morning. It's why they're in the super minority, isn't it?
Yeah, look, voter fraud, it seems like both parties are just one-off. Voter fraud exists. You and I are from the Boot Hill that had a rich history in the state and federally for voter fraud that would determine state elections. The voter block in Southeast Missouri run by the J.B. Conrad congressional machine and before him and after him made a difference. And Southeast Missouri could make a deal with the Pendergast machine or others and move state elections. So voter fraud is real. We've seen a lot of different gimmicks. And
I tried to tell someone the story of you having to put a VHS tape in. These were younger guys. They're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, it was big brick things that Barclays videotaped these folks trading bottles of whiskey, like actual brown bottles to go in and vote. I was like, and they actually believe that part. The part they couldn't get their head around is that you had a VHS tape in a big camcorder that you had sitting somewhere.
Yeah, we had it like under a guy's arm. And, not only was there federal investigations, but the courthouse burned down and was believed to be connected to that. And, you saw an end to some of that. But in St. Louis, you had ballots not delivered to West County, polls staying open late. I think the Democrats it's not voter fraud. It's just they have gotten so much better at gaming elections. Republicans just refuse to address it. And so mail-in ballots have dislodged Republicans in a lot of places because Democrats got good at it. Democrats have figured out, election polling and getting more polls and early voting in the cities, and Republicans have ignored it. And so to me, the Republicans are half to blame because they have refused to adopt and embrace some of the changes. And then there's some, I think, liberties that the Democrats have taken care of. But going back to the deal, I don't see a Democrat, even Sam Hamra's son, who is, I'm sure, very talented. But I just don't see the Democrats getting anywhere close.
I thought the Democrats had a chance in Crystal Quaid, very talented politician, to go build her up, let her run statewide once, let her get her paces under her. Similar to how Jay Nixon and other folks ran once, then go down and be a top contender for that state Senate seat and maybe a special election next spring, and then have her set on a 10-year career in the Senate and then maybe be governor 10 years from now. And then they just go screw it up. It's so Missouri Democratic Party of them.
Look, I agree. I think that Crystal doesn't lose no matter what. I think the same things with Bill Eigel. I think Bill Eigel is a guy who, even if he loses, he would be in a
Let's jump to
strong.
that. Let's jump to the Republican side there and talk about that.
Okay.
If I had to say today, the field, even though I'm talking to the guy in the Mike Kehoe campaign headquarters, Ashcroft's front runner. A lot of it based on name, no question. Kehoe second. I mean, he's got the network, he's got the money. When Mike Kehoe walks in a room, you just know a big damn deal's in the room.
Yep.
If I always tell people in Jefferson City, if the room you're in caught on fire and Mike Kehoe started telling us all what to do, we would all just do it. He would just be the leader. It would just that's how it would happen.
All
Then you got Bill
cattle, no
Eigel.
hat. He's all cattle, no hat.
Well, Bill Eigel, state senator from St. Charles, been a hellraiser. Let's start with him. Obviously, the longest shot of the three. I really felt like there was a lot of combustible parts that Eigel had coming together that could have vaulted him up from a long shot to like right there at the top. And I still think that could come together. It felt to me like maybe more in February, it just almost ran too hot for a serious donor to want to co-opt and be branded with that. It felt like maybe just a little too much drama.
So, look, I actually like Bill Eigel, and I'm not going to apologize.
If you don't like Bill Eigel at Patty Malone's, there's something wrong with you. If you do like Bill Eigel in the state Senate, there's something wrong with you.
I like him. I think he's a very decent guy. He's passionate. He looks a lot like the Republicans that are winning elections around the country. And so I agree with you. He had a look of a winner. I think that's getting farther away. I think he wins even if he loses, because I think he can pivot and run for county exec in St. Charles County. It would be a very strong contender and then still be on a viable statewide. So I don't think Bill necessarily loses either way. But I do think that.
What if Bill would have ran for lieutenant governor out of the gate with the same veracity he's run for governor?
It would be tough, if not impossible, to beat.
I think he'd been impossible to beat too. I really do. But he's running for governor. If you're Bill Eigel, the piece of this puzzle that's so hard, you've got a lot of steam in this hot air balloon, right? To get it to take off, you need a little money, right? And I think he's done a great job cobbling together money. He's been hustling. He's found that trial attorney lane. He's been hitting that hard. To really break through money wise, though, it feels to me like maybe it's a little too hot, a little bit too over the top for a serious donor. However, that Facebook community, the activist community, he is the best interview in the party. He's the best orator in the party. He knows how to fire those folks up. And my gut, it tells me he's picking that pocket of Jay Ashcroft when he picks those votes.
You know what? Look, I'll just tell you, there's a story about, that a guy was trying to figure out the difference between commitment and contribution. And a guy said, look at your breakfast place. And he said, see the egg, the hen made not a commitment, made a, what I just said a minute ago. Sorry. Not a commitment, but a, shit. I just said it
first, the chicken or the egg?
No. But the chicken made a contribution to the breakfast. He said the hog made a commitment. and in politics, Bill Eigel needed to make a commitment to going after Jay Ashcroft. And I think his failure to do that, I think he's too, I can't let Mike Kehoe get ahead. I can't let, Jay. And you can't take two guys on. I think the space he should have gone from day one was to take from Ashcroft the conservative, agenda and just prosecute his case against Ashcroft. And I think that was where he could have won. I think it's almost too late for him to do that. And again,
I think we live in a volatile culture. I think our culture is volatile, angry. And I think it's not too late. I do think that the Bill Eigel from the fall, whatever he was doing, and I don't know specifically what he was doing, but in my gut, the way people talked about him, I don't feel like it's exactly the same as it was October, November, December Bill Eigel. And I felt a little bit like it just overheated a little bit in February. I personally think we live in such a volatile culture. He could absolutely write that thing, get a big check, which would bring in other big checks, and he could be right there at the end.
But look, He's taken on the Senate leadership,
Yeah.
taking on fellow members of the House. I mean,
Let me ask
the
you a question. Do you
legislature.
think it
He's taken
matters
on
to
Ashcroft. He's
big
taken
donors if you're
on.
fighting with Senate leadership? I think that's just confusing.
It's confusing. You can only have so many enemies, and
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Bill Eigle's talent. If he took on Ashcroft is not the agility, not the ability to respond. Bill Eigel would have Donald Trumped him, as Donald Trump did to the rest of the Republicans in 2016. Eigel could have done to Ashcroft, but instead, Eigel shot everybody around him and not just the one guy he needed to. I'm telling you, that is what be the reason that he loses if he loses.
How much money will Mike Kehoe have raised by the end of July?
Between the PAC and all his operations,
what did he report in January?
Over 4 million, 5 million, 6, I think around 6 million.
What
total.
will he report on his 8-day out report?
I think he'll be over 13 to 16 million between all his committees.
Wow, that's amazing.
Look, the guy gets up before dawn, and
he does. There, it's good to see him ass kissing, and if it is, that's fine. But I've never seen anybody through force of personal will. I run into people that I when I worked in politics for Rod and Mark back in the day that had long since kind of left, and I didn't hear from them anymore. I have ran into them again because Mike Kehoe's went personally to their hometown and brought them back in. The son of a gun raised $200,000 in Dexter. I mean, what the hell? That's amazing. It's just force of will.
He can count labor. He can count ag. He can count industry. He can count urban, suburban, rural. The guy can sell anybody, and people suspect he's a guy. Look, you want to send an asshole to Congress, someone who's going to really punch them and tell them what to do. You want to have the good guy, the guy you want to drink beer, eat barbecue, and talk about better roads and better schools. That's the guy you want as governor. And I'll just tell you, if you've ever been to an RGA conference, Republican Governors Association, or Democrat, those are the guys. They've got personality. You want to be around them. They're really neat people, and they care about other people. Mike Kehoe fits that profile, and I think people are suspecting if I want a guy that's an ideologue, I've got Bill Eigel or Jay Ashcroft, and they're going to give me that red meat. If I want a guy that's going to make our schools better, build roads, and actually build stuff, it's Mike Kehoe.
Okay, what is his? I'll play devil's advocate here. They call him tax hike Mike. What's your pushback?
Well, I mean, you can look at the Ashcroft name is synonymous to taxes too, but I got to say this: being for a tax that actually builds something versus being for a tax that just absolutely creates more agencies and government jobs are two different things. And to the extent that Mike Kehoe understands how to create jobs versus,
is Mike Kehoe mean enough to take down Jay Ashcroft?
He doesn't have to be mean enough. He has to just work hard enough. And that's
okay. Is Mike Kehoe mean enough to reach a very angry Republican electorate? Is he angry enough to reach an angry Republican primary electorate?
Look at immigration. I think Kehoe has already been hitting that because I think he truly believes the frustration that everybody else sees. And to that regard, there are some issues that are coming down. He is a devout Catholic, who is pro-life through his core, not because it's convenient in an election. He's a guy that it feels strongly about immigration because it's broken, and he's not going to change. All I can tell you is that I'm seeing a guy emerge that works harder than the rest, who's raising more money than the rest, who has a vision that the rest don't have, and who's starting to voice the same tones and emotion that I think the American people and the Missouri people want to hear.
I think you guys can tear down Jay Ashcroft without Mike Kehoe having to look into a camera and do it. I mean, an attack ad isn't the guy running against him in the thing. Can he look into the camera and be mad enough to reach a large part of that Republican electorate that's very angry?
Well, it might take his wife off camera, waving at him or something, but Mike's just not an angry person. He is a very center guy. That's who you want to manage your government. But to that regard, he has the passion. And so I do believe he'll get there.
Is passion enough? If you don't have anger, is passion enough?
I think it is. I think, in fact, the American people are going to turn very shortly and embrace passion and competence over anger. I think anger is something that's been contrived by the news media, by foreign powers, by special interests to to subvert America culture into hating each other. I think Mike Kehoe is that turn. It's going to bring us back to the center of actually doing good things to make schools and
I agree with
highways,
everything you said, but I think
jobs
the
come
anger's
back.
real. I agree with everything you said about it being manufactured, but I think it's real.
Oh, I do. I agree. It
Let's talk about
becomes
Jay
real.
Ashcroft, front runner in the race. People will start off. They'll say, "Well, it's his name ID from his dad." Well, there's a gal from south of here whose dad was governor. You know what they call her now? They call her governor. And Jay Ashcroft's fundamentally a good guy, been a great vote getter.
Mhm.
I mean, that name. You and I both worked polls in southern Missouri on a hot August day. The folks that go there have more gray hairs than you and I. Well, you don't have any somehow, but I have a few. They have more than me.
Yeah.
These are older folks. They have a very good view of the name Ashcroft. I think Jay Ashcroft has as a base of support. What is the base, Jay, that are going to vote for Jay Ashcroft? Doesn't matter how many commercials you run. Doesn't matter if Mike Kehoe raises $20 million. What is Jay Ashcroft's floor in this race?
So, I think his floor is going to be, 25 to 30%. And
I do
I'll
too.
tell you why. Look, he is incredibly wide, but incredibly shallow. And the fact is that as people get to know the difference between him and his father, I think that's a challenge for him. And I'll give you an example. We have a case study when Jay ran for state senate in St. Louis. Jay Ashcroft ran that race, lost that race because that was a confined market that he was able to be defined over about a 5-week period. Once he is defined, it's more than just name ID. The name ID, Scott, gets him the win. But in a governor's race, it's not just about name ID. You have the money to define someone. And when it comes to definition, Jay's has his record has lost. He won on name ID for Secretary of State. He lost for state senate, a much easier race because he was
That's a tough
defined.
race. Jill Shoup's a good politician. That's a tough
He is.
district for a Republican. I mean,
He is.
if he would have won that, I think it would have been an upset. I mean, it was a tough race he ran for state senate.
That
Uh,
district, a
but he
favored
did lose.
Republican. Scott, you remember that was right after redistricting. And that district we wrote for a Republican. When John Lamping had it, it was 10 points worse. He could have won that, but he didn't do the work, and he's not doing the work today for governor. I think he's a very
I don't know.
decent
I
man.
see him doing the work. I do think Kehoe's very good. I mean, Kehoe literally is everywhere. He's good about taking a picture, and it looks compelling. Like whatever he's doing looks like you want to be there. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I don't think Jay quite has that part down yet. To me, all those other things you're talking about, I think are minor things. If I'm on the Ashcroft campaign, I'm like, where's the money? I'm the front runner. My dad was the United States Attorney General. That to me, the other parts of the campaign, I think a reasonable person could debate one way or the other, and maybe they're right or wrong. The one thing I don't know how you kind of get your head around is where's the money?
Look, Mike Kehoe, I think, earns every donation he gets, and Jay Ashcroft does the same, except for one
There's just a
thing.
lot less of them. I mean, there's
Jay's not making
startling
the
amount
calls.
less.
Look, I think his dad is engaged in this campaign. I think he's got some other lieutenants that are engaged in his campaign, but I don't see him engaged. I'll take issue with you, Scott. I don't see Jay Ashcroft putting the time or energy in that you see in either Bill Eigel or anywhere near that you see Mike Kehoe. I
think
think the
Bill
person
Eigel
that works
gets a
the
lot
hardest to win.
more. I mean, Bill Eigel is very good about getting a lot of attention for anything he does. I mean, look, Bill Eigel's a compelling person. You go to any restaurant in this town, they're going to talk about Bill Eigel. He's a very compelling guy.
Absolutely.
Jay Ashcroft, all those things aside, I think you could make that argument. I'm not sure. I don't disagree with you necessarily. But the one thing is there's not enough fundraising. Why isn't there more fundraising for a person who's leading this race by 10 points?
Because I think his dad is working harder than he is. And I look, Ashcroft Sr. is an incredible man. I just don't think that I think he wants it more than Jay from what I've seen. I'm telling you on the campaign trail, Jay is not the one that is hungry to work for this. I think he may think he deserves it. That's probably mean. And I apologize, Jay. I shouldn't say that. But look, if Mike Kehoe has never been given anything in his life, he doesn't wait around for someone to give him something. He works for it. I think Jay has had a life where his father has been an incredible source in his life, but I think it has made Jay maybe numb to the reality of how hard you got to work to win something.
What is the number that Jay Ashcroft hits that makes him very hard to beat?
In terms of dollars?
Yeah.
Probably 5 million, maybe 6 million.
Yeah, I've always thought if Kehoe had 3-1, there you go. And Eigel, I think, may take more votes away than people think. I think Eigel has a better has the best ground game put together. I think he'll surprise some folks when they actually count the ballots. But I still think a lot of those votes are coming from Ashcroft. A lot more than will come from Kehoe.
I'm smiling because some gentleman named Mike Carter is talking about how Jay is the workhorse, and of course Eigel is too. Again, Mike Carter is the best promoter there is. So, Mike, I definitely give you that. There's no one better that promotes than Mike Carter.
And there's no one we've talked about that's more fun to go hang out with either. I think he may be doing more work than he gets credit for, but that's also part of the campaign. I do think whatever Bill Eigel does has a big ripple. I think whatever Mike Kehoe does, he maximizes a bunch of different ways. I will say I don't know that Ashcroft gets every drop out of everything he does, and there may be, but that's still not a positive. I still think he's a front runner. I still think that there's going to be some groups. If I had to guess, there's going to be some interest groups that maybe are on the other side of Kehoe that are like, he's still polling well. We're going to come in. Remember Koenig and Rick Stream, the hospital guys came in because he was polling well, and they came in and helped Koenig. And I don't think that worked out for him, but they did come in and I thought really helped him get across the finish line. There's going to be some groups that kind of like with the Hospital Association and Koenig.
Oh, yeah.
Are going to see a guy up, and if he makes commitments to be for their stuff, I mean, there you go. I think, you can't be for everybody.
But
the other side of these issues have money too.
Kehoe already has the money, and he's already up on TV. And I think you're going to start to see that erode, and he'll be in this market or that market. I think that Kehoe has a strategy. I don't know how Ashcroft, if Kehoe runs the right campaign, which he, the candidate, is, it's up to the other boneheads running his campaign to do things right. I think Mike is doing his job. If we do everything right and the guys that are my bosses do everything right, I don't know how he gets beat. And again, I think you have a candidate as hardworking as Kehoe.
It's pretty strong words. You usually qualify a lot of things. That's pretty direct.
I agree. I'm just telling you, I think this is Kehoe's to lose. I think that Jay, even if he gets late money, it's going to be too late. Look, Scott, the cost of media is just going to go through the roof those last few weeks. And if you don't have momentum before that time, I think it's probably. And look at the Greitens versus Coster race. Coster started over 15 points up after primary election day, and look where it ended up. And it was because he had built the momentum, and that momentum carried him through. I think you see the same thing with Kehoe, even if Ashcroft gets late resources in. And again, the fact that Eigel has not prosecuted his case against Ashcroft, I think that Eigel will have some growth, and they'll counterbalance each other, whereas Eigel could have taken this guy out, and he would have been the bigger contender. I think
if Mike Kehoe doesn't win, who wins?
What's that?
If Mike Kehoe doesn't win, who wins?
At this point, I would say Ashcroft, only because I haven't seen Eigel, that killer instinct on Ashcroft to take away those votes. A lot of the votes Ashcroft has right now are held because of the family name that Eigel could get. And to that regard, the fact that Eigel's not prosecuting that is why I think Ashcroft comes in second. Eigel is the guy that could have won this race, that I think that in retrospect, tactically, it's just about too late for him to have that chance now. And Ashcroft is the one who hasn't changed anything, who tactically doesn't look like he is, and that's why I think Kehoe wins.
I think Eigel was always a long shot. Last guy was to go and say it's the governor from McLeod County back in the 50s. So it's always been a long shot historically, but I still think he has every ability to put together a winning campaign. I think Bill Eigel has a way of getting people talking. He just got a knack for it. And I think a guy like that can rally faster than a lot of others. David, we've done this for an hour. Is there any way – I don't want to do state senate races. Hell, I'm bored of listening to myself talk. Is there any way we can come back next week and talk about some state senate races?
If you want me, I'll be glad to come back. I feel sorry for the listeners, but in to that regard, I always appreciate an opportunity to talk with you. You're one of the brightest guys that I've known since you were much younger than me. You were a guy who I always thought had talent, who was always going to exercise it, and who had better political judgment than I had at your age. So I'm always honored by the opportunity.
I enjoy it. Guys, Courtyard by Marriott, when you come to town to file for office, one of the 800 people that filed for Secretary of State, stay at the Courtyard. Thanks, folks. United Fiber, the internet, the rural broadband so good, the city folks want them to come into town. I appreciate you guys. David, thank you again. We will see you Sunday for This Week in Missouri Politics.
I may move my vote to Mike Carter if he keeps going.